It was a typical Saturday morning in Ohio, cold, gray, and oddly still for a weekend. I had just made my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and was staring out the window at the fall leaves swirling across the yard. It wasn't a bad morning, but it felt empty in a way I couldn't quite explain. Greg had left early to run some errands, and Chloe, my stepdaughter, was still upstairs, probably lost in her own world. Chloe was 18 now, about to leave for college in a few months, and I was already dreading the empty house. It would be just Greg and me, and in a way, I didn't know if I was ready for that. I'd spent the last 20 years of my life with Greg, married for 18 of them, and things had settled into a routine. A comfortable routine, I thought. We were good together, or so I had convinced myself. We'd raised Chloe together, and while the tension between us could be noticeable at times, we were a family. Or at least, I thought we were. My mind drifted as I sipped my coffee, but the sound of footsteps on the stairs pulled me out of my thoughts. Chloe appeared in the doorway, looking more serious than usual. She stood there for a moment, her hands wringing together. I noticed a strange tension in her posture, something I hadn't seen before. "Mom," she said quietly, her voice unsteady. "I think you need to see something." I blinked, trying to gauge her expression. Chloe and I had always been close. Sure, she was a teenager, and we didn't always see eye to eye, but she'd always been open with me. The look on her face made my heart skip a beat. "Chloe, what's wrong?" I asked, putting my coffee down and standing up. My worry spiked as she handed me Greg's phone. I took it from her slowly, but I had no idea what to expect. I unlocked the phone, and the moment I saw the screen, I felt my breath catch in my chest. There, staring back at me, was a photo that made everything else in the world blur out of focus. It was a picture of Greg with a woman. They were sitting close together, so close that their bodies nearly touched. He was laughing, his face full of that carefree grin I hadn't seen in a long time. She was smiling too, bright, wide, the kind of smile that seemed to reach her eyes, a smile that could only come from someone completely at ease. I felt a jolt of recognition, but at the same time, I didn't. The woman in the photo was unfamiliar to me. She wasn't someone I knew. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Chloe's eyes were downcast, her expression unreadable. She seemed so much younger in that moment, as though she was carrying something too heavy for her. She bit her lip and shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure of what to say next. "I don't know," she said, her voice small. "But I've seen her name in his texts." "I thought you should know." I blinked, trying to steady myself. My hands trembled slightly as I held the phone, but I couldn't take my eyes off the woman's face. Her warm smile. Her closeness to Greg. "What do you mean, you've seen her name?" I asked, my heart pounding. I wanted to stay calm, but the anger and fear were bubbling up inside me, making it hard to think. Chloe took a deep breath, clearly nervous. "I've seen the messages. I don't know exactly what they're about, but," she paused, struggling to find the right words. "I just thought you needed to know." "It doesn't feel right, Mom." My mind was racing, but I couldn't focus on her words. I was fixated on the photo. The woman was too familiar with Greg, too comfortable with him. Too happy. I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself. I couldn't lose control. Not yet. I handed Chloe the phone back without saying anything. She looked at me briefly, her eyes filled with the weight of something unspoken. She didn't say another word. Instead, she left the room, disappearing up the stairs. I could hear her retreating footsteps, but I barely registered the sound. I was left standing there, holding Greg's phone, the photo still glowing on the screen. My hands were shaking now, and I felt a chill running through me. How long had this been going on? Was this an affair? Was it recent? Or had it been happening for months? My mind kept asking questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. Greg and I had been together for years, 20 years, in fact. We'd built a life together. He was my partner, my best friend, my husband. The idea that he could be seeing someone else was so far beyond anything I'd ever considered that it almost didn't make sense. But here it was. This photo was evidence of something I couldn't ignore. The front door opened, and I heard Greg's voice calling from the entryway. "Hey, babe. I'm back." I stood still for a moment, not knowing what to do. Should I confront him right away? Should I wait, try to gather more information? My heart raced as I heard his footsteps coming closer, and I knew that I couldn't delay the inevitable. I glanced back down at the photo, my stomach sinking. Then, I put the phone down on the kitchen counter and went into the living room, trying to compose myself. I wasn't sure what I was about to do, but I knew one thing for certain: I was going to get to the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Greg came into the room a few moments later, smiling as he set down the grocery bags. "Hey, hon, how's your day been?" he asked casually, clearly unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I looked at him, searching his face for any sign of guilt, but his smile remained unchanged. His casual demeanor only made my pulse race faster. "Sit down, Greg," I said, my voice more controlled than I expected. He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. "What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for the phone on the counter and slid it toward him. His smile faltered for a moment when he saw the screen. "Greg," I said, my voice colder now. "Who is she?" For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stared at the phone, his eyes darting between the photo and my face. I watched as his jaw tightened, the color draining from his face. "It's not what you think," he finally said, his voice shaky. I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. His silence spoke louder than words. I knew there was more to this story, there had to be. "You're lying," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Greg looked away, his face flushed with panic. "I swear, it's not what you think. I can explain everything." But nothing in his voice reassured me. In fact, it only made me feel more certain that this was the beginning of the end. I stood up, pacing now. "Explain it to me then, Greg," I said, my voice rising. "What is going on here?" He swallowed hard, and for the first time in years, I saw him visibly nervous. It was a sign, I suppose, that the walls were closing in on him. "I'll tell you everything," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "But it's complicated." I could feel the silence stretching between us like a tightrope. My heart was racing, and all I could think about was that photo, Greg laughing with that woman, the two of them sitting so close, so comfortable. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter with every passing second. I had demanded an explanation, but Greg was stalling, and I could see that the weight of his guilt was crushing him. "Tell me everything, Greg," I said again, more forcefully this time. My patience was running thin, but a part of me, the part that had always believed in him, still hoped that there was some explanation that would make sense of it all. He stood there for a long moment, his back turned to me as if gathering the courage to face the truth. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit that told me he was stalling. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained, like the words were painful to get out. "I've been seeing her," he said, turning to face me. His eyes flickered with something, guilt, shame, maybe fear, but he didn't seem to want to meet my gaze. "Her name is Laura. She's a colleague from work." I took a step back, my mind trying to process the simple, terrible admission. Laura. I'd never heard her name before. Never met her. My throat tightened as I struggled to keep my voice steady. "So, this thing with her has been going on for a while?" He nodded, his face pale. "It started a few months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. We've been texting, meeting for lunch. Nothing physical, not like you're thinking. But he stopped himself, pressing his lips together. "I guess I got caught up in it. She was there when I needed someone. I don't know how it happened." My head was spinning. How could this be happening? How could he, the man I had been married to for so long, the man I trusted with everything, tell me this? How could he betray me like this, with someone I didn't even know. I fought the urge to scream at him, but it was all I could do to keep my composure. You got caught up in it? What does that even mean, Greg? I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't let him see how much he was destroying me. You're telling me this woman has been part of our life for months, and I had no idea? You're telling me that you were meeting her, texting her, and I was completely in the dark? Greg shifted uneasily. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid. He trailed off, and his voice cracked slightly. I didn't want to lose you. But I had already lost him, hadn't I? So, what now? I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. What does this mean for us, Greg? Are you planning to keep seeing her? Is that why you've been so distant lately? He hesitated, then stepped toward me, his hands outstretched, as if reaching for some semblance of reconciliation. But I stepped back. His touch didn't feel like comfort anymore, it felt like a reminder of everything that had been shattered. I don't know, he said softly. I think I need space to figure things out. The words hit me harder than anything. Space. He needed space. He was asking for time, but time was something I had already given him, years of it, years where I'd trusted him implicitly, never once questioning his loyalty. And now, he was telling me he needed space to figure things out, as if this was some sort of decision he could still make. I shook my head, finally letting the tears fall. You're unbelievable, I whispered, barely able to speak through the pain. You've been lying to me for months. And now you want space? You want time to figure out if you want to be with me or her? Greg's face twisted with guilt, but it only made things worse. I'm sorry, but I never meant to hurt you, really. His words were hollow. His apology didn't feel like an apology, it felt like an empty gesture, like he was trying to make himself feel better. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could possibly expect me to forgive him, to understand. But the only thing I could do was stare at him in disbelief, the weight of his betrayal sinking deeper with each passing second. You've already hurt me, Greg, I said quietly. And I don't think you even realize the extent of it. You've broken something inside me that I don't know if I can fix. The words stung, but they were the truth. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't know who I was anymore. The person I had been before this moment, the woman who trusted her husband, who believed in their marriage, was gone. That woman didn't exist anymore. Greg stood there, looking lost and small, his apology lingering in the air like a ghost. He reached out, but I didn't let him touch me. I couldn't. I needed space from him now, too. I needed time to think, to figure out how I was going to move forward. I think you should leave, I said, the words coming out with more strength than I felt. I need some time alone. You should go. He nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and frustration, and without another word, he turned and walked out of the living room. I heard the sound of the front door opening and closing, and then, silence. I was alone. The photo. The texts. The lies. All of it hung in the air like a dark cloud, and I couldn't escape it. My mind raced through every conversation we'd had, every moment I thought was real. Had he been lying to me the whole time? Had I missed the signs? Or was this just the first time I was seeing the truth for what it was? My hands shook as I sat down on the couch, staring at nothing, my thoughts spinning in circles. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure where to find them. The one thing I knew for sure was that nothing would ever be the same. The house felt impossibly quiet now, the kind of silence that fills a space with weight and uncertainty. I sat there on the couch for what felt like hours, my mind replaying everything I had just learned. I kept trying to make sense of it all, trying to figure out what came next, how this moment fit into the larger picture of my life. The truth Greg had just confessed was a brutal blow, but it didn't feel like the final word. It couldn't be. I couldn't move. I couldn't even make myself stand up and do something, anything, to break the oppressive stillness. My eyes were fixed on nothing in particular, but in my mind's eye, the image of Greg and that woman, Laura, sitting together at the cafe, kept flashing before me. The way they looked at each other. The way he smiled with her, a smile that seemed so genuine, so effortless, that it made me feel like I had been living in a carefully constructed lie. I had known Greg for so long. We had built a life together, had made promises to each other. But now, as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, I felt more and more like I was just a spectator in a life that wasn't mine anymore. A life I had been so sure of, only to find that it was nothing but a facade. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Chloe. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know you're hurting, but I think you need to know something more about Laura. I found something on Dad's phone." My heart skipped a beat. Chloe had already given me the photo, but now she was telling me there was more. What could she have found that I hadn't seen? I couldn't believe I was even considering this, but I felt a mix of hope and dread. Maybe this was the missing piece, the key to understanding the whole mess. I typed back quickly, my fingers trembling as I replied. "What did you find, Chloe?" The reply came almost instantly. "I found another photo, Mom. It was saved in his hidden album. It's from a weekend they spent away together." I stared at the words on my screen, my pulse quickening. A weekend away? I felt my stomach twist. There were so many layers to this betrayal. The photo I'd seen earlier was bad enough, but this was different. A weekend together. The implication was clear, even though Chloe didn't spell it out. There was more to their relationship than Greg had admitted. I quickly texted her back, my voice shaking as I typed, "Where is this photo? Can you send it to me?" Another pause before her reply came. "It's in the hidden album on his phone. I can't send it to you, but I think you need to look at it yourself." I swallowed hard. A hidden album. Greg had been hiding things from me for months, maybe even longer, and I had never suspected. The idea of confronting him again filled me with dread, but I couldn't ignore this. If I wanted the full truth, I had to see it. I had to see everything. I stood up, my legs shaky as I walked across the room to Greg's study. His phone was still on the kitchen counter, but I knew I couldn't just pick it up casually. This wasn't just about scrolling through pictures anymore, this was about facing the truth, all of it. And as much as I didn't want to, I knew that I needed to know everything. I took a deep breath before picking up the phone. The familiar weight of it in my hand felt foreign now. It was no longer just a tool to stay in touch with him. It was a doorway to a version of Greg I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But I had to open it. I unlocked the phone with the code I'd known for years. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen, then went to the photo album. It was there, the album marked with a little lock symbol. I had never paid attention to it before, but now it felt like the most important thing in the world. I tapped on it, and the photos loaded slowly, each one more intimate than the last. Pictures of Greg and Laura together, more than just the one I had seen earlier. There were other photos from their time at a cafe, but these were different. The weekend photos. In one, Greg and Laura were sitting on a dock by the lake, their faces close, their hands touching. Another photo showed them holding hands as they walked along the water's edge. But the most damning one was a photo of them lying on a blanket, the sun setting behind them. Greg's arm was draped over Laura's shoulders, and she was looking up at him with a smile that mirrored the one in the cafe picture. A smile of affection, of intimacy. It was a look I had seen in his eyes before, but never directed at me. My heart sank. I scrolled through more photos, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain this. Maybe there was something here that would make sense of what I was seeing. But as I went through each image, the weight of the betrayal grew heavier. Greg had been sharing parts of himself with her that he had never shared with me. And I had no idea. I put the phone down, my hands trembling. My head was spinning. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something, but I couldn't bring myself to do anything but sit there, staring at the phone. The truth had come crashing down on me, and I didn't know how to respond. As I sat there, dazed, I realized something. I had to confront Greg. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I couldn't live in this limbo, this space between knowing and not knowing. He had to answer for this. I stood up and walked back into the living room. My heart was still pounding, but now I was determined. I had seen everything I needed to see. There were no more questions, no more excuses. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, had betrayed me. I couldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't wait any longer. I had the answers, and now it was time for Greg to face the consequences. The silence that had settled over the house felt suffocating, but the anger that burned inside me was louder than the silence ever could be. I had the photo, I had Chloe's message, and I had Greg's confession. There was no more room for excuses. I wasn't going to stand there pretending that everything was fine anymore. I marched toward the door of Greg's study, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty house. The familiar warmth of the home, the place where we had built our life together, now felt cold and alien. I couldn't understand how we had gotten here, how I had let myself be blind to everything happening right in front of me. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. When I opened the door, I found Greg sitting at his desk, his back to me as he sorted through some paperwork. He didn't hear me enter, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for pleasantries anymore. I wasn't here to make him feel comfortable. "Greg," I said sharply, my voice cutting through the quiet. He spun around in his chair, looking surprised. The moment his eyes met mine, I could see the flicker of panic behind his usually confident facade. His eyes were darting, searching for something, anything, to help him avoid the inevitable. "What's wrong?" he asked, though his voice sounded strained. I didn't give him a chance to continue. I stepped forward, holding his phone in my hand, the photo still fresh in my mind. "You're going to tell me everything," I said, my voice low but firm. "I've seen the photos, Greg. I know about you and Laura. I know about the weekend you spent with her." Greg's face paled, and for a split second, I saw guilt flash across his features. But then he straightened himself, trying to regain his composure. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice shaky but defensive. "I told you, it was just a few lunch meetings, nothing more. I wasn't buying it anymore. I wasn't going to let him feed me the same lies he had been telling for months." "Don't lie to me, Greg," I snapped. "I've seen the photos. I know about the weekend getaway. Don't insult me by pretending it was nothing. You need to stop lying." His eyes flickered to the phone in my hand, and I saw a flash of anger in his gaze. "What do you want me to say? What do you want from me, Kira? What do I want?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I want the truth. I want to know what happened between you and her. I want to know how you could betray me like this, after everything we've been through." He stood up now, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, his tone softer, but it was still filled with the same desperation. "This wasn't planned. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I shook my head. "That's not good enough, Greg. You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did happen. And now I'm standing here, watching the man I've spent my life with tear everything apart because he couldn't keep it together." Greg looked down, his jaw clenched tightly. "I made a mistake, Kira. I never wanted to hurt you, but I didn't know how to stop it." I wasn't sure if I could believe him anymore. The words he was speaking were familiar, but they didn't carry the same weight. They didn't hold the sincerity they once might have. They were just words, empty words, trying to patch up a wound that was far too deep to heal with simple apologies. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Why, Greg? Why Laura? Why did you feel the need to go to her?" He seemed to hesitate for a long time, then took a step closer to me. "I don't know, Kira. I don't know. I guess I just got bored. Not with you, but with everything. Our lives became routine, and I didn't realize how far I had drifted until it was too late." I felt a surge of anger rise in me. "Bored? That's your excuse? You're telling me you had an affair because you were bored?" My voice cracked on the last word, the frustration and hurt pouring out uncontrollably. You didn't think about me, or Chloe, or anything else. This is what you do when you're bored, Greg? You ruin everything? He stepped back, as if my words had physically struck him. He ran his hands through his hair again, looking more lost than ever. I know I messed up, Kira. But I want to fix this. I want to make it right. I shook my head slowly, disbelief spreading through me. You can't fix this. You can't just undo the damage you've done. I paused, my throat tight. How long has it been going on? How long have you been seeing her? Greg lowered his gaze, his face clouded with shame. A few months. Maybe longer, I'm not sure exactly when it started. But it wasn't planned. It was just a slip. A mistake. A mistake, I repeated bitterly, as if the word itself was somehow supposed to make this all okay. Greg, this isn't a mistake. This is a choice. A deliberate, repeated choice to lie to me, to betray me, to break me. He was silent, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. It was as if, in that moment, he realized that there was nothing left to say. There was no excuse, no justification that would make this right. He had ruined everything, and now he was paying the price. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, I said quietly, the weight of the words heavy on my chest. I don't know if I even want to. The finality of it hit him like a punch to the gut. His expression faltered, and for the first time, I saw something close to desperation in his eyes. But it didn't matter. Because I had already made my decision. I need space, Greg, I whispered, the words cutting through the thick tension in the room. I need time to figure this out. We need time. He didn't respond, just stood there, his face a mask of regret and helplessness. I turned away, my eyes burning with unshed tears, and walked out of the room, leaving him standing there, alone with the consequences of his actions. I spent the rest of that day in a haze. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. The weight of Greg's betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating everything around me. I had sent him away, asked for space, but it felt like the silence in the house was louder than anything he could have said. I couldn't bring myself to talk to Chloe. Not yet. She had already carried so much of this burden by being the one to uncover the truth. I needed to protect her from the aftermath of Greg's lies, at least for a little while longer. She was still in her room, and I could hear her moving around, probably unsure of how to approach me. I could sense her anxiety, but I couldn't bring myself to deal with it right now. There was too much inside me, too much anger, too much confusion. Instead, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, my thoughts spinning in a way I couldn't control. My hands were cold, and my chest ached as I tried to make sense of the mess Greg had made. How could he do this? Why didn't he talk to me? All the questions, all the doubts that had been swirling in my mind for hours, collided together in a single, overwhelming wave of grief. The days seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like time had slowed, like I was living in a dream, or a nightmare. And when the darkness of evening finally settled in, I still couldn't find the answers I needed. I went to bed that night and laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The house was so quiet, too quiet, and I could hear every creak of the floorboards, every faint rustle of the trees outside in the wind. But what I heard the most clearly was my own heartbeat, pounding against my chest, as if it were reminding me that I was still alive. Still breathing. Still here. But was I still me? I didn't know the answer to that. I didn't know if I could ever go back to being the person I was before Greg's betrayal, the person who trusted him with everything, the person who had believed in our marriage. That person felt like a stranger now. The woman who had built a life with him, raised Chloe together, dreamed of a future, she was gone, replaced by someone who could barely look at her husband without feeling disgust. I had spent so many years believing in something that turned out to be a lie. All those years of memories, moments, hopes, and dreams, they were built on a foundation that was now crumbling away. And I wasn't sure what would remain after it all fell apart. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me. I turned my head to see that it was a text from Chloe. "Mom, can we talk? I know you're upset, but I just want you to know I'm here for you." I blinked, the words blurring through the tears that had begun to well in my eyes. My heart ached for her, for the pain she must have been feeling as well. Chloe had always been the rock in this family, strong, independent, wise beyond her years. But she shouldn't have to bear this weight. She shouldn't have to carry the burden of Greg's mistakes. I quickly typed back, my fingers trembling, "Not tonight, sweetheart. I just need some time to think. But we'll talk soon, I promise." I set the phone down again and closed my eyes, trying to block out the ache in my chest. But sleep wouldn't come. Not now. Not when my mind was racing through a million different possibilities, all of them painful. The next morning was no better. The sun barely peeked through the curtains, casting the room in a dull gray light. I got up, mechanically moving through the motions of the day: shower, coffee, breakfast. But nothing felt normal. Nothing felt right. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything I had built had been shattered, that the foundation of my life was no longer solid. I kept hearing Greg's voice in my head, his apologies, his desperate explanations. But they meant nothing now. They didn't matter. I heard the sound of Chloe's footsteps coming down the stairs, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of something resembling purpose. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, looking at me with those eyes that had always been full of warmth and kindness, but now were clouded with uncertainty. She didn't speak immediately, but I could see that she was waiting for me to say something. "Chloe," I stopped myself, unsure of what to say. The words felt wrong, the emotions too raw to put into sentences. She took a step closer, her gaze gentle but filled with concern. "Mom, I just want you to know. I'm here. I know you're hurting, and I don't know how to fix it, but I'm here." I felt the tears I'd been holding back slip down my cheeks, and before I knew it, Chloe had crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. She was strong, stronger than I had been at that moment. She held me, comforting me in a way I hadn't expected. For a few minutes, we stood there, and I let myself feel the pain. I let myself mourn everything that had been lost. "Mom," Chloe whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to lose you, too. I know this is hard, but I want to help you through it." I pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. But I don't know what to do with all this." Chloe nodded, understanding more than I gave her credit for. "You don't have to know right now. But just take it one step at a time. Whatever you decide, I'll be with you." I didn't have the answers, not yet. I didn't know how to move forward, or if I even could. But in that moment, I realized that I wasn't entirely alone. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. But somewhere amidst all that pain, I began to feel something else creeping in: determination. For the first time since I had found out about Greg's betrayal, I realized that I didn't need him. I didn't need the lies, the secrets, or the broken promises. It took a long time for me to get to that point. The first few days after the confrontation had been consumed with grief, and rightfully so. But as the days passed, I started to realize that I didn't have to keep suffering in silence. I didn't have to keep waiting for Greg to apologize or prove himself. I had been living my life for so long with someone else's choices weighing on me, and now I had the chance to make my own decisions that would take me in a direction I could control. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. The weight of what Greg had done was still heavy on my heart, and I couldn't just let it go overnight. But I knew something needed to change. For me. For Chloe. For us. I woke up early that morning, the sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the room. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just breathing, letting the quiet settle around me. The house was still. No sounds of Greg moving around, no familiar footsteps echoing down the hallway. He was gone, and for the first time in a while, the absence of his presence didn't feel suffocating. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my movements deliberate. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the table, staring out the window. The air was crisp outside, the leaves rustling in the trees, but I felt a strange sense of peace in that moment. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Chloe had left for school, and it was just me in the house. A house that felt different now, but it was mine. And I was starting to see it again, not through the lens of betrayal, but through the lens of possibility. I thought about the future. What would it look like? What did I want it to look like? The answer wasn't clear, but it didn't have to be. I was taking the first steps in a new direction, one that didn't involve Greg, one that was entirely mine. I had my own life, my own dreams, my own ambitions. I grabbed my phone and texted my lawyer. Can we schedule a meeting to start discussing the divorce? The message was simple, but it sent a shiver down my spine. Divorce. It was a word I never thought I would have to consider. But now, it was the only option that made sense. I couldn't stay with someone who had broken my trust in such a fundamental way. Not when the pain of that betrayal was so fresh, so raw. I couldn't keep living in limbo, hoping that things would magically improve. The phone buzzed in my hand, and I quickly opened the message from my lawyer. Absolutely, I'll have my office call you to set up a time. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It was the first real step I had taken toward reclaiming my life. A life where I didn't have to question every decision, every moment. A life where I had the power to choose my own path, without Greg's shadow looming over me. That evening, after Chloe had returned from school, we sat down together in the living room. She could tell something was different in my demeanor, but she didn't press. She knew, as I did, that the time had come for me to make the decisions that would change everything. Mom, Chloe began quietly, her voice hesitant. What happens now? I looked at her, my heart swelling with love. This was the part one feared, the part where I had to explain the future, where I had to help Chloe understand the reality of what was happening. But in her eyes, I saw a quiet understanding. She had been with me every step of the way, even when I hadn't known how to show her the strength I felt. I'm filing for divorce, sweetheart, I said softly. It's time for me to move on. For us to move on. Her face remained calm, but I saw the flicker of sadness in her eyes. This wasn't what either of us had expected, but it was the reality we had to face. I understand, Chloe said, her voice steady. You deserve to be happy, Mom. And if this is what you need, I support you. The words were simple, but they hit me harder than I expected. My daughter had always been my source of strength, my reason to keep going. But now, in this moment, I saw that she had become a source of strength for herself too. I love you, I whispered, reaching out to pull her into a tight hug. I love you more than anything. She hugged me back just as tightly. I love you too, Mom. We sat there for a long moment, not saying anything more, just holding each other. It wasn't an end, not really. It was a new beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings with the lawyer, and paperwork. But amidst all the chaos, there was an unexpected clarity that settled over me. The decision to move forward, to finally let go of the life I had shared with Greg, had lifted a weight from my shoulders. I could breathe again. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had the strength to face it. The days passed in a blur of paperwork and decisions, and with each step I took, I felt more certain about my choice to move forward. I had filed for divorce, and the first meeting with my lawyer had gone better than I expected. I was more prepared than I had been in years, and I was starting to think about what my future could look like without Greg. It was daunting, yes, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I could see a life for myself beyond the shadows of betrayal. But then, just as I thought things were finally settling, he came back. It was late one evening when I heard the familiar sound of Greg's car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of dread and curiosity washing over me. I didn't want to see him. I wasn't ready to talk to him. But I knew that he wouldn't stay away forever. Not when things were unresolved between us. Not when he had done everything in his power to deny the consequences of his actions. I was sitting in the living room, going through some old family photos, when I heard a knock on the door. I knew it was him before I even opened it. I could feel the weight of his presence outside. And yet, when I stood up and walked toward the door, part of me still hoped I was wrong. But I wasn't. There he stood, on the other side of the threshold, his hands in his pockets, his face drawn with exhaustion. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something closer to vulnerability. It wasn't the Greg I had known, the one who could hide his emotions behind a smile and a joke, but the man who had made an irreparable mistake. The man who was standing before me, hoping for forgiveness, but unsure if it was even possible. "Kira," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately. My mind was still trying to process the fact that he was here. That after everything, after the lies, after the betrayal, he thought he could just walk back into my life and everything would be okay. I stood there for a moment, just looking at him, feeling the weight of the decision that loomed in front of me. Should I let him in? Should I listen to his plea for another chance? Or should I stand my ground and let the past go? "Greg," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I don't know what you expect from me right now, but I can't just pretend that everything is fine. You broke something between us. And I don't know if it can ever be fixed." He sighed, his shoulders slumping as if he had already anticipated my words. "I know," he said softly. "I know I can't undo what I did. But I'm asking you, Kira, to at least listen. To hear me out. I don't want to lose you." I shook my head, stepping back slightly. "You already lost me, Greg," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "You don't get to just walk back in and expect everything to be okay. I'm not that person anymore. You've taken that away from me." There was a long silence between us. Greg looked down at the ground, his eyes full of regret, but it wasn't enough. Regret wasn't enough to erase the hurt, the pain, and the betrayal that he had caused. I had spent years trusting him, loving him, and all of that had been destroyed by his actions. I couldn't just forget that. "I don't expect you to forgive me right now," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know if I deserve your forgiveness. But I want to try. I want to make things right, Kira. If you'll let me." I felt a surge of anger at his words. How could he be asking for forgiveness? How could he want to fix something when he had been the one to destroy it all? I had been so sure of him, so sure of our life together, and he had taken all of that away. Now he wanted to fix it with words? With promises? "No," I said, my voice firm this time. "I can't. I can't just go back to pretending that you haven't destroyed everything we had. I can't put myself through that again, Greg. I deserve more than this." His face fell, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. He reached out, but I took a step back, putting space between us. "Kira, please. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No warmth, no love. There was nothing left of the man I had known. All I saw was a stranger standing in front of me, someone who had lost the trust one had built in him over the years. "I don't want this anymore," I said quietly, finally finding my voice again. "I don't want you anymore, Greg. You've hurt me in ways I can't even begin to explain. And I can't keep holding on to a memory of a person who doesn't exist anymore. You're not the man I married. You're not the man I thought you were." Greg stood there, silent, his eyes brimming with tears that he couldn't quite hold back. For a moment, I thought he might say something more, try to convince me once again that he was worthy of my forgiveness. But he didn't. Instead, he just nodded, slowly, as if the reality of what was happening was finally sinking in. "Goodbye, Greg," I said, turning away and walking back into the living room. "I hope you find what you're looking for. But it's not with me." I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had made my choice. The door had closed on us, and I wasn't about to reopen it. It's over. The divorce is final. And for the first time in months, I can breathe. The day the papers were signed, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, staring at my reflection as if seeing myself for the first time in years. The woman who looked back at me seemed unfamiliar, but also stronger than I remembered. She was bruised, yes, but she was still standing. She was still here. The process of letting go hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. The legalities had been straightforward, Greg's assets divided, the house settled. I hadn't fought for anything but my peace of mind. I had taken back control of my life, piece by piece, until I could finally say that I was free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayal, free from the life I had been living in Greg's shadow. The hardest part had been accepting that the man I had loved for so long wasn't coming back. Not the way I had hoped. And that, in itself, had been a form of liberation. Realizing that I could move forward without waiting for him to fix what he had broken. That I didn't need him to complete me. I had to learn to complete myself. Chloe had been my rock throughout it all. Her support, her understanding, had given me the courage to keep going. She was stronger than I ever imagined, handling everything with grace, even as we both navigated the pain of this new reality. It was a quiet evening when I sat down with her on the couch, our favorite movie on in the background. She was curled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. We hadn't talked much about the divorce since that day, but I could feel the shift between us, no longer weighed down by the burden of Greg's choices, but moving forward into something new, something different. Something better. "Mom," Chloe said, her voice soft but filled with warmth. "I'm proud of you. For everything. I know it wasn't easy, but you've done it. You've moved on. And I can see it. You're different. You're you again." I smiled, a genuine smile, and wrapped my arm around her. "I don't think I realized how much I had lost of myself until I had to find it again," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I'm getting there, sweetheart. I'm getting there." Chloe nodded, her eyes bright. "I'm so glad. You deserve this, Mom. You deserve to be happy." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. I deserved to be happy. I deserved to love and to trust again. But more than that, I deserved to love myself, flaws, mistakes, and all. The next chapter of my life wouldn't be easy. Healing takes time, and I knew that I wasn't suddenly whole again just because the divorce papers were signed. But I was on my way. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my own life, and now, I could see a future that was bright with possibility. There was a whole world out there waiting for me, one where I could explore new dreams, new passions, and new relationships, on my own terms. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't walking it alone. Chloe would always be by my side, and I would always have the strength to move forward, no matter what. The past was behind me now, and as I stood at the threshold of this new life, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. The future was uncertain, but I was ready for it. I was ready to live for myself. And as I stood there, looking out the window at the setting sun, I realized that the future, at last, was mine to create. Author's note. This story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the face of betrayal, heartbreak, and uncertainty, the protagonist's journey towards self-discovery and independence is a powerful reminder that no matter how deep the pain, there is always the potential for healing and growth. Life, even after the most painful of endings, holds the promise of new beginnings. The strength to move forward lies within each of us, and when we choose to reclaim our power, we open the door to the future we deserve.